evening and welcome. On my show tonight, one of the world's great showmen and entertainers, the one and only Liberace. Well, my next guest is one of the most flamboyant characters and popular entertainers that there's ever been. He's been at the top ever since the early 50s, and in all that time, he's never lost his capacity to amaze and delight. As a money spinner, he outgrosses almost every other entertainer and is among the top 10 of all American showbiz entertainers. He cares little for convention. He cut down Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto from 153 pages to 24. He wears clothes so colourful as to make a peacock look like a house sparrow. Here he is in a scene from a documentary made about him and recently repeated on BBC television. Ladies and gentlemen, Liberace.
I feel underdressed, actually.
Well, actually, this is quite subdued to the one I just saw on television.
Was that the one where we saw the hot pants thing? Was that the most outrageous one you've ever...
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
In fact, it's so outrageous, that costume, that it's touring Australia right now without me in it on a mannequin, of all things, and it's... touring the country of Australia for muscular dystrophy,
right.
And they told me that in the first 10 days they took in something like $40,000 or something of paid admissions. So I'm glad it's doing some good for charity, if nothing else.
That's right. Who in fact designs these outfits? Do you do them yourself?
Well, I have a hand in it in so much as I dream up the ideas, and they're carried out by a wonderful man that's been making them for me, who's in his late 70s, who used to be a famous costume designer for motion pictures. He costumed all the costume type movies of the past for Rudolph Valentino and Douglas Fairbanks and Frederick March and people of that era. Mm. And this particular suit, because Mr. Acuna, the fellow I speak of, is getting way up in years, I'm breaking in some new talent. This was designed by a chap in Hollywood who's become quite popular for his television clothes that he does for television personalities. He's only 21 years old, and he's become one of the top designers of Hollywood, and he designed this suit for me.
Tell me, what I often wondered about this, you've got so many of the extraordinary outfits. What do you do with the old ones?
Well, I have like my own costume company. You know, I put them in a stockpile, and I store them and I keep them in top condition. And whenever I'm called upon, you know, to do a guest appearance or a television show or film or a tour of a country where I've perhaps never been, I'll just refer to my costumes like you would go into a store and just pick out what you want, you know. I have over 1,000 of them.
Really?
Yes.
Why do you enjoy wearing clothes like this? Because you obviously do.
Who said I enjoyed it?
Oh, you love it.
Come on. You love it.
No, I'm really stuck with the idea. It started out really quite simply in the beginning. About 1952, I played the Hollywood Bowl, which is a vast amphitheater that seats about 20,000 people in Hollywood. And it was very innocently suggested that I, instead of wearing a black suit of full dress like I wore in my television series, that I wear a white suit so that I could be seen by the people in the back rows. And because all the musicians were dressed in black and they thought I would stand out more. So that's how it started, really. I wore a white suit instead of a black one. And the newspapers and the cartoonists and the columnists picked it up, and I became controversial because at that time anyone who wore a full dress suit made of white material was very unconventional. So that started it all, and then from there I was caught in a trap. You know, each time around I had to top myself, you know, and I went to my next outfit, which was very daring, was a gold lame jacket, which nowadays would go unnoticed.
Yes.
You know. And Elvis Presley and people like that started copying me. You know, they began wearing it.
Well, no, it's true if you look at the kids today on the pop scene.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
they're wearing the kind of clothes that you started
David Bowie and Gary Glitter and all these fellows. You know, they got sequins on their eyelashes and all this sort of thing. And, you know, more power to them, you know, if they've got an idea and want to carry it a bit further and gain attention. I suppose that's why they do it. That's why I did it, to gain attention.
But would you go so far as they do, into sequins in the hair and the
I don't have
and the makeup?
No, you see, I've established my mold years ago because I was the first. So there'd be no point in my trying to copy them who are copying me.
Because dressing the way you do, it would be likely that people might get the wrong idea about you, wouldn't it?
Well, that could very well be.
Yes.
However, I don't think, you see, I've been doing it for so long now, I think that people know that it's part of my showmanship and it's a sort of a stage show business gimmick, you know, and they look at it in that light, I'm quite sure, because I think the thing, I made a big mistake one time in my career. I got so tired of all of this dressing up business, and it was an expensive joke, you know. So I decided it might be very, very exciting and different, you know, to go conservative. You know, wear very conservative clothes, no candelabra, no glass top on the piano, just very conservative. And my income dropped $800,000 in 1 year. So I said to my manager, I said, open up the closets, here I come. So back came, you know, the Liberace that everybody wanted to see. They were disappointed. People are very disappointed if I don't, you know, look like they think I should look.
Yes.
And each year, you know, I have to be more outrageous than the year before.
Yes.
A couple of times, you know, I've tried, because I kind of think, oh, that's such a pretty costume. I think I could wear that one again, you know. And I wear it again. They said, you wore that last year. You know? So this year, I think I've reached a peak. I don't know what direction I'm going to go now. I really don't.
Yeah.
Too bad I...
Direction.
What's that, darling?
I said come in this direction.
This is not an audience participation program. Well, it could be.
Well, you know, people... I have been offered the centerfold of magazines, you know, but unless you can be the first, it doesn't mean anything. You got to be the first. And there's no point in my trying to be another Burt Reynolds, you know. And if they'd asked me 20 years ago, I would have jumped at the chance, you know.
You wouldn't have minded then. You would have done that magazine news.
I would have done anything to be a success.
Really?
Just about. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And but you see, the thing that most people forget is that years ago, you didn't have to go too far to be noticed. No. You know, like back in 1956, I made a film called Sincerely Yours. Yeah. And I thought it would be marvelous to wear a fur coat to the premiere, you know, with all the lights and the big cars and the limousines driving up. Out I'd come in this white fur coat, you know. The people weren't ready for a man in a white fur coat, you know, in 1956. You know, they are now, you know. But in 1956, Jack Warner said that fur coat cost the studio about $5 million. Because the people, when they saw me in this white fur coat at the premiere, they stayed away and drove. You know.
Really, isn't it? Because they objected to it.
Yeah, but like you say, you know, they thought something funny about me.
Yeah.
I gave it to my mother. She loves it. She changed the buttons from here to here. You know?
You had an offer there, Lee, didn't you? Do you still get offers of marriage in fan mail and this sort of thing?
Yes, it's quite interesting. And lately, since they've seen this film that the BBC's shown, I even get marvelous letters from children, you know, who say, would you please adopt us? You know, things like that. Because they heard on the film that I said, I wish I could adopt children like I adopt dogs. And you'd be surprised how many children have written me saying, would you be our daddy? You know, they figure they have a pretty good life. And play with the dogs, if nothing else.
That's right, yeah. But, I mean, why have you never got married?
Well, I suppose I was put off by it by, first of all, I come from a family of divorce.
Yes.
And for a while there, I was waiting to see how George did, you know, my older brother. And he's finally very happily married for the 5th time. And,
He's overcompensating.
yeah, making up for me.
That's right.
I've come very close to it, but I think the one thing that stood in the way really was my career, because I was so intent, you know, on being a success in show business, and which meant that whoever I was involved with at the time couldn't stand the separations. I came closest to marrying with Sonia Henney.
Really?
Yes, but my visit to England for 6 months back in 1960 took care of that.
Yeah.
Because she got tired of waiting. And when I came back, she sent me a wedding invitation, but it didn't have my name on it.
Do you ever regret, though, when you look back and say somebody like Sonia Henney or any of the other women that you've dated from time to time, did you ever regret not having married any of them?
Yes, I think so. Primarily, not that I, oh, excuse me. Felt funny. Not so much for the companionship or having someone lovely around you and talented, which Sonia Henney was. Because fortunately, what people sometimes forget is that freedom can be a beautiful thing too. You know, I have great fun. In fact, a lot of my married friends envy me. You know, they sometimes pay a lot of money to get their freedom back. But what I do miss, I think, is having a family. I think I would have enjoyed having my own children. I brought up so many other people's children. I raised my niece and my kid brother's children, and I've changed many, what do you call them, nappies?
Yeah.
I've changed many of those, yes. And I love children, and they seem to love me, which to me, if I were to receive only one compliment in my life, I think I would best like to have it come from a child.
Your name, though, you mentioned Sonia Henney as being somebody that you were involved with. Reading your book, your autobiography, which I much enjoyed, actually. I think it's very funny, and you know, it's good. But Mae West you were romantically linked with once. The mind boggles. I mean,
Well, that's going a bit far. Not romantically. I think we had a great admiration for one another. She admired me, and I admired her, because to me, she's one of the great legends of our time. And to be in the presence of someone who's that legendary is quite mind-boggling for me. And the story I tell in my book, which actually is very true, she in jest said to one of our mutual friends, it was her birthday, and they said, "What would you like for your birthday?" She said, "Just bring me Liberace," you know. And so they told me that she'd said that, and I said, what a marvelous chance to meet her. So they dressed me all up and put a great big red ribbon around me and wrapped me like a package, you know. Rang her doorbell and ran, you see. And her servant came to the door, and I said, "I'm Miss West's birthday present." He gave me a funny look, you know. She always surrounded herself with these big muscular guys, you know. And he looked like he didn't know whether to laugh or to hit me. So he went and got her, and I said, "Happy birthday, here I am," you know. Well, we had a most wonderful evening. We got to know each other, and she began telling me the story of her life, which is quite amazing, because when she spoke of Mae West, she spoke of her as another person. She's really quite a different person in real life. She has this reputation for being a sex symbol and all that, but in real life, she's really quite a simple lady. You know, she doesn't drink or smoke or tell dirty jokes or hates anyone who smokes in front of her. You know, she's very pure-minded, you know. And I found her very fascinating. In fact, my mother and her became very good friends. And I've had many interesting times with her. I think one of the fun times is when we went to the premiere of a show in Hollywood, which we were both represented in. It was a puppet show, and it's called Les Poupées de Paris. And Mae West and I were both in it. And so we went together. And I called her and I said, "I would like to invite you, and may I escort you to the premiere?" And it was very marvelous. She said, "My limousine or yours?" You know, it was really kind of marvelous. And I said, "Well, I have a lovely car, and you're welcome to, I'd love to pick you up." And she said, "Well, that's kind of out of your way. Why don't I pick you up?" So she came up to my home in Hollywood in her lovely limousine, and she looked up at my house, and I said, "Could you come in?" She said, "Well, it's a bit late. We better get to the theater." And she said, "But if there's any time afterward, I'd love to see your home." So on the way to the theater, I was describing it. I said, "I think you'd like my house. It's all done in white, and it's got gold doors and a lot of pretty crystal chandeliers." And I said, when I bought the house, I had this marvelous organ, and I said, "I've had it all done in gold, and it's just beautiful, and I'd love to show it to you." So at the end of the evening, we were ready to leave, and some of the reporters kept following us everywhere we went, you know. Oh, I left out a cute little part. As we were walking down the aisle to take our seats, all of us, naturally, all the heads turned to look at her. And a few looked at me. And all of a sudden, right in the middle of this aisle in this big theater, she stopped, you know, and she looked all about, and she was just loving it all, you know, all the people gazing at her, you know, in admiration. And I thought, well, this is a bit much, you know, just, you know, standing there adoring her public, and they're adoring her. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of her mouth, she said to me, "You're standing on my train." You know, and I was. So I looked down and I got off her dress, and away we went to our seats. But anyway, to get back to the end of the show, this reporter said, Where are you and Liberace going now?" She said, "I'm going up to his home to look at his gold organ." I played it for her, too. Oh, God.
You devil.
Sorry, Mom.
Talking about that couldn't have been the incident that inspired this headline that we've got here that's in the British... There you are, Lee, look at that.
Oh, my God, I remember it.
Liberace, the night I lost my virginity.
I remember it well.
You do?
Yeah. I understand that somebody from your House of Commons or Parliament or something objected to that. You know, they thought it was kind of much. But what I thought was so funny, the article was right next to a very pretty young lass,
well,
you know.
Yes, in fact, look, you can see it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't object to that, but they objected.
Well, you see what we've done there? We put a little sort of thing across her chest.
I'd know her anyway.
You know, that's BBC being puritanical and not you. Did you enjoy writing this book?
I did. I not only enjoyed it, but I think it was an emotional experience. I think sometimes it's kind of good to relive some of the bad days of your life as well as the good days, because it helps you appreciate, you know, the nice things that come into a person's life when they become success. And I've had many years of nonentity and sadness and sorrow, and I think this was a wonderful chance for me to get it off my chest, you know.
Yes, yes.
Tell it all, you know.
Yes. When you look back, though, on your career, I mean, you were trained as a classical pianist, weren't
Yes,
you?
uh-huh.
Do you ever, in any sense, regret not having kept that up? Because you were something of a child prodigy, weren't you, playing when you were 4 years old and this sort of thing?
I really have no regrets. I love classical music, but I think I would have been a much lonelier person if I'd been a strictly classical pianist, because you play to a different audience of people. And at the time that I was a concert pianist, in those days, the people who seemed to come to recitals and concerts were sort of pseudo musicians. You know, they really, it was just kind of the society thing to do. They really didn't enjoy it that much.
No.
And you know, I like to see people really let go when they enjoy themselves. I like them to applaud and mean it, you know.
Yeah.
And these people, you know, I used to play at those little afternoon teas and recitals and musicales, they called them. And they'd sit there and, how lovely, you know. And something was missing, you know. I discovered what it was. I wasn't reaching the man on the street. And I think when I did discover my audience, it was really, truly the working class people, you know, and they were the people that really became my friends, you know.
Why? Why that particular area, do you think?
I think they recognized that I was one of them.
Well, indeed you were. Indeed you were, because, I mean, your father was, came from Italy, wasn't he?
Yes.
You're a poor family.
Yes.
And indeed, I mean, you have, in fact, a classic American success story. You made it against the odds, didn't you?
I guess you might say that. We were brought up, you know, the children were brought up during the Depression years. And my father, who was, at the time, a very classical musician, played the French horn, and could no longer find a job for his music. So he was forced to work in a foundry and a factory and things like that. And his hands got real grubby and all that, you know, and it hurt him, you know, inside. But yet he was a proud father, and he wanted to provide for his family. So we all sort of pitched in and helped him. You know, my mother worked in a cookie factory, and George made sandwiches in a sandwich shop, and I worked in a restaurant as a dishwasher and a waiter, and we all sort of pooled our resources.
Is your father still alive?
Yes, he's 91.
Good one.
And he's still alive, yes.
Because you mention in your book, and of course on television a lot, your mother, but you never
Yes.
mention your father, do you?
Well, the reason for it, of course, is that mother and father were divorced when I was just in my early 20s. And they both remarried again, and for many years there were like two Mrs. Liberaces, you know. So whenever I spoke of my mother, it was my mother I was speaking of and not my father's wife, you know. So to avoid any, you know, unpleasantness or embarrassment, I spoke more of my mother, because he had chosen to live a more private and quiet life.
But did that really, going back to a question I asked you earlier, did that really leave a very deep scar on you then, about relationships?
I think so, because I had this kind of idyllic idea about my family, you know, as a kid, as a child. I thought nothing could ever happen in my family. We were such a closely knit family. And from all appearances, you know, I thought my mother and father were very much in love and all that sort of thing. And I was very disillusioned when I discovered that my dad had had a mistress for many years.
That's a heck of a time to retain something like that, though,
Yeah.
isn't it, Lee?
Uh-huh.
It really is. What was the point then, when we just go back to those musical salons you used to play in? Was there a point you pinpoint, in fact, in time when you suddenly were playing something and you mixed in the showbiz with the classical, which became your trademark?
Well, I think the one significant, there I did it again. The one significant memory I have of the abrupt change happened in a town in northern Wisconsin, which is my home state. And it was on Thanksgiving Eve, which is a night where everybody's home stuffing their turkeys, you see. And nobody came to see me that night. It was a very small turnout, you know. And whenever I have that kind of an audience, fortunately, I haven't had them in recent years, but early in my career, there were many nights that I didn't attract the crowd, you know. So this was one of the nights. I get kind of nervous. I feel I have to do something really special to win over this audience, because a small audience is very difficult to entertain. They become kind of embarrassed that there aren't more people there for you, you know.
Yes.
And so that night I did my thing. I did my Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, Mozart, and all the classical stuff. And it was sort of something missing, you know. And at the very end, they applauded politely, you know, and I came back. I said, is there anything else you'd like to hear? Because I appreciate you coming out tonight, you know. And if there's something I haven't played that you'd like to hear, I'd love to do it for you. So some guy said, play the Three Little Fishes, you know. So I said, I'd love to. So I played it in all the different styles of the different classical composers. We had a ball, so that kind of went from one to the other. And before I knew it, I was playing popular music.
Yes.
And this night was reported by the local press, and it was picked up by the wire services, and it went across the country. And the headline said something to the effect that Three Little Fishes swim in sea of classics. And all of a sudden, I started getting these marvelous offers, you know. Would you come and give a concert here? Would you come there? And but you must do those funny encores, you know.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, my salary had, you know, gone skyrocket, you know. And I found I was getting offers for supper club engagements like the Waldorf Astoria and the Persian Room and places like that. And I knew I was on my way then, you know. And I began entertaining people who, you know, really showed their appreciation,
Yes.
you know, rather than they were being polite, you know.
Yes. You mentioned money there. How important is money to you?
Well, I think when you're on your way to becoming important in any business, money is very important, because you need it to invest in yourself. You have to reinvest into your business, into your career. And that's what I did. I invested into my career early in my career, and I had very little money, and I had to spend it very wisely because I was also supporting my family. And I remember being in New York back in the early 40s, and I didn't want my parents to think I wasn't doing well, you know. So I would send home more money than I could afford, and so that they would think I was very successful, you see. And I would eat day-old bakery and lots of milk because it would swell up and fill you up. And I went to every, during these lean years, I went to every Broadway show, but I only saw the second half because I'd mingle at the intermission, at the interval, when all the people came out on the street, and I'd put on my nice suit or my tuxedo, and I'd mingle with the people, and I'd walk back in the theater with them, and I'd see the second half. So, and nobody ever challenged me, because I always looked like I belonged there, you know. So anyway, now I've reached the point where I don't have to try, you know, to make a living. It just happens.
Yes.
I just do my thing, and people fortunately want to pay to see it.
How much care do you take of yourself in a sort of physical sense?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Well, you do. You look very good, actually.
I feel good, and I think the reason I take good care of myself is because as recently as 1963, I had the last rites, and I was told I was going to die. It was accidental that I inhaled some carbon tetrachloride fumes, which almost killed me. And this was from a cleaning solvent that was used in my costumes, to clean my costumes. And I slept in a room, had no windows, and my costumes were in there, and I inhaled all these fumes. And the only thing really that saved my life was the drastic news of President Kennedy being assassinated. And my manager awakened me and said, "Turn on your television. They've just shot the president." And if I had stayed in bed another hour or two, I would have died in my sleep.
Good Lord. So that's left you very sort of cautious and aware of death, has it?
Well, when you almost have something like life taken away from you, you begin to realize how precious it is, and you take better care of it. You don't take things for granted.
Yes.
When I wake up in the morning and I feel good, I say, "Thank God I feel good."
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever been drunk?
Oh, yes.
No, I asked you that because you
I told about it in my book. Yeah. I was very young. I think I was about 16, and I was playing with an orchestra, and we used to do these little weekend jobs. And in fact, it was one of those jobs that I lost my virginity, but I'll go into that. But I was always the youngest one in the group, and I'd borrow George's nice band uniform, so I'd look kind of nice, you know. And I said, "George, could I borrow your tuxedo tonight? It's a big anniversary party, and I want to look like the other guys, you know." His band uniforms didn't match the other fellas' outfits. So they were all wearing these tuxedos, so I wore George's brand new tuxedo. We were about the same size. See? And so we get to this nightclub or roadhouse, and they're having this big anniversary party, private party, and the people who were celebrating the anniversary sent over a bottle of something to the orchestra. I think it was gin, bootleg gin, and they made it themselves. And anyway, they passed the bottle around to all the fellas in the band were twice my age or more, you know, and they'd take a slug, you know, and it would come to me, I want to be one of the fellas, so I took a slug too. And I'll never forget it. It hit me all of a sudden, like. I'm playing the introduction to the karaoke, which was one of my best numbers. And I played da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and I fell off the piano. Oh, God. But I have to finish. So anyway, about George's tuxedo.
Right.
Brand new, right? So anyway, they carried me out, put me in the car, and they finished the night without me. And evidently, I had passed out, you know, in the car, and they left the window open a little bit so I could have some fresh air. And they thought I'd sleep it off, you know. Well, I didn't. I got sick all over George's tuxedo. And so I was a mess, and so was George's tux. So anyway, they took me home, rang the doorbell, ran like hell, and just left me at the door, and there I stood crying. Would you believe it? I said, "George, I'm sorry." He never let me borrow his clothes after that.
What's been your worst experience on stage, though, Lee? The most embarrassing experience?
Oh, God.
All the years that you've been standing up there doing
Well,
that.
I think the most embarrassing. Remember when those mohair suits were so popular, those shiny ones?
Right.
Well, they took a marvelous crease, you know, when you put a crease in them, but you could never get that crease out once you got it in there, so it just kept getting sharper and sharper and sharper. Well, one night in Las Vegas, I'm playing, and my mother's sitting on the ringside, and the stage is quite high, you know, and I bent over to give her a little peck on the cheek, you know, and I burst out of my trousers. And I didn't have too much underneath. No. And that was
You mean in the way of underwear?
Yeah.
In the way of underwear, yes.
No, because it shows through those kind of clothes.
Yes.
Any little things, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, the underwear.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, what I wondered about...
Tom Jones has made a career out of it. Oh, God. Sorry about that, Tom.
That's all right.
We're good friends, really.
Yeah. Do you ever think, to be serious for a moment, about the great disparity there is in your lifestyle and the great poverty there is in the world today? I mean, does that ever sort of bother your conscience at all?
Not a bit. I'll tell you why. Because I feel that all the beautiful things I live with, my homes, my cars, my antiques and all that, don't really belong to me. I feel they've been placed in my care to look after. And somebody's going to enjoy them long after I'm gone, I'm sure, only because I've taken care of them. Most of the homes that I live in are restorations, that they were going to tear them down and bulldoze them. And I came along and saved them because I felt they were worth saving. And the fact that I'm enjoying them for these few marvelous years that I hope to have left, I think I'm entitled to it because I've worked very, very hard all my life. And it's about time I got my rewards.
You think they're just rewards? You see them as
well,
I mean, it's an over.
Well, don't you feel that anyone who's worked 30, 40 years of their life and worked hard should get something for it? I do.
Sure, but I mean, your dad worked that long, didn't he? And got
Yes.
nothing for it, did he?
Well, he wasn't blessed with the times or I think my dad was very happy doing what he did, but had he lived today, I think his opportunities would have been far greater. He didn't have television. We didn't have, you know, the society we have today, you know, the affluent society, where almost, you know, unemployment is really at its lowest peak, I think, of all time.
Yeah, there's still immense poverty, of course, in the world, and that's
Yes.
the
That's
sadness
true.
of it, isn't it? You know,
Yes.
the disparity between the great wealth of the world, the immense wealth, and the immense poverty. And
Well, I think, you know, that fortunately I live in a country that I think we've been taught, you know, that take care of others, but take care of yourself first so that you don't have to depend on others. And I think it's very important that you, in your own personal life, so that you're never a burden to anyone. I would hate to think that in my late life I would be a burden to anyone.
But
I'd like to think that it's because you take care of yourself, you take care of your family, you take care of the people around you, your dear ones, your loved ones, and you take care of your country, and you take an interest in what's happening in your country. And I think that my main purpose in life is to bring happiness to people. And when I look into their faces, I think I'm accomplishing that. I feel I am.
have you ever felt, though, Lee, at any point in your life have you ever considered giving your money away?
Well, I did once. In 1963, in fact, when I was told I was going to die, and the doctor said, "You better put your house in order," you know. So I called my business manager from California. This was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I made out my will. I took care of, you know, everybody I wanted to take care of the best way I could take care of them. And then after it was all over and I made out the will, all my property and material things and all that. And then I asked my business manager, I said, "Do I have any cash left?" You know, he said, "You have about $750,000. So I said, "Do you have any objections, since I'm going to die anyway, if I spend it? You can't take it with you, and I'm damned if I'm going to give it to the government," you know. So he said, "No, go ahead," you know. So I spent $750,000 in less than 2 weeks' time. And I bought presents for people. I bought a house for my sister and a car for different ones who needed transportation. And I bought motorcycles and boats and furs and jewelry and whatever I thought people never had would like to have, you know. And not just my family, but my friends and my associates. And then about 2 weeks later, the doctors came and said, "You know, some fantastic thing has happened to your body chemistry. I think you're going to make it." So I left the hospital broke. You know, but alive. That's what, and that, I think, is when I realized that you can't buy life, but you can. Anyone, if they have the perseverance and the faith in themselves, I think can make money. I really think they can.
Yeah.
Because after that, when I returned home, we had a big meeting, you know, because I run a corporation that has about 27 families in it that depend on me for a livelihood. So we had a big sort of board of directors meeting, And they said, well, you realize, you know, that you're broke. And you have your homes, you have your cars and everything. I suggest maybe you sell some of these things. You know, that was the suggestion. I said, I'm not selling a thing. I said, I'm going to keep everything, and I'm just going to charge twice as much as I did before. And I'm going to work half as much. So it's up to you, you know, to get me better jobs than you got me before. So that's what I did. I worked half as much and got paid twice as much for it. And in about 2 years' time, I made up all this money.
Yeah.
Came back to me.
Yeah. That's a marvellous notion, that. You work half as much for twice as much. I must remember that. Yeah.
It worked for me.
Yeah. Can I spring something on you?
Sure.
Can I know, I'm not pulling any baloney. I know that we didn't ask you to play or anything like that, but I think you disappoint me, all the people there, and the millions watching at home if you didn't. Could I ask you to play for us? Do you mind?
No.
Sure? We have around there.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was going to say I need a piano.
We have one.
Oh, thanks. Thank you very much. The BBC will hate it when they get the bill. May I be among the first to wish all of you a Merry Christmas. Could I do that?
sit down here to say the best of BBC props department. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen. Sit down. Ladies and gentlemen, no more, really, because, as I said, we did spring it on Lee, and it's been very good of him to play it. This is the best the BBC props department could come up with. It's leaking all over the piano. Lee, thanks for being my guest. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Michael.
And every success with the book.
And that wonderful Michael Crawford, please tell him for me how much I enjoyed him. He's marvelous.
He is
that
funny
boy.
man, isn't he?
Oh, he's got to be one of your best. Yeah, he's just great.
Liberace, thank you so much indeed.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.
The life and works of Colette and Iris Murdoch, just two of the hundreds of episodes of In Our Time, available to listen to now on BBC Sounds.